and welcome to the People Who Read People podcast, hosted by me, Zachary Elwood. This is a podcast aimed at better understanding other people and better understanding ourselves. You can learn more about it at peoplewhореadpeople.com. In this episode, I talked to a professional astrologist named Ophira Edut. To be clear up front, I don't believe in astrology, and this isn't the type of thing I'd usually cover for my podcast. But this was a chance for me to ask some questions that I've always wanted to ask about astrology. And more interesting to me, people's belief in astrology, why they believe it, what those beliefs are like, how they relate to other beliefs. I think whether you're into astrology or whether you're completely skeptical of astrology, you'll like this episode. It's one of the stranger and more unique episodes I've done, but for that reason, it might be one of the more interesting. I'll give you a quick backstory on how this talk came about. I often get publicists reaching out to me asking me if I'd interview the people they're promoting. Someone doing publicity for Ophira reached out to me and asked if I'd be up for talking to her about astrology. I say no to most of these requests, all except two so far, because most of them aren't really connected with my interests or the theme of the show. But this one did pique my interest. Here's what I wrote to the publicist. I'd be interested in talking to them only if they were interested in having a tough but always respectful conversation where I asked them questions like, what would you say are the best arguments that astrology is really a thing to people who believe it's all bullshit? I think this stuff is nonsense, but I am interested in why people believe this stuff and think it would be interesting to engage in a way that is all too rare, talking openly and honestly about that, and doing that in a respectful way, related to my work on reducing toxic political polarization, which I tie the convo into. It could be quite unique, end quote. So that was the letter I sent to the publicist, the email. To my surprise, Ophira was into the idea, and I do want to say that I respect her for coming on to talk openly and honestly about her beliefs, despite my obviously not very inviting email and my skepticism. I think not a lot of people are willing to do that for things they believe, so I do respect that. A 2022 YouGov survey found that, quote, a little more than 1/4 of Americans, including 37% of adults under 30, say that they believe in astrology or that the position of the stars and planets influences people's lives. About half of Americans say they don't believe in astrology, and 22% are unsure. Younger American adults are more likely to say they believe in astrology than older Americans are, end quote. And surveys have found support in astrology going up significantly in the past few years. Although I will say I take a lot of these surveys with a big grain of salt because there have been some massively inaccurate and wrong surveys that have been going around lately that have been debunked and such and not replicated. I'm going to read verbatim the full unedited bio of Ophira that the publicist sent me. Ophira Edut is one of the most sought-after astrologers and intuitive advisors of our times. As the longtime resident astrologer for Elle and the author of over 20 books, she is a private advisor to a roster of CEOs, celebrities, global leaders, and successful entrepreneurs. Ophira has spoken at universities, conferences, and events for the past 20 years, delivering keynotes and live interactive workshops. Her productivity training has been presented to entrepreneurs and executives at companies including Nike and Saks Fifth Avenue, and at event spaces such as Luminary NYC, 92Y, Soho House, and Barcelona's Joan Miró Museum. On television, Ophira has appeared as a guest expert for Bravo, MTV, Good Morning America, and The Today Show, and created the first streaming reality TV dating show based on astrology, Cosmic Love. Ophira's book, The Astrology Advantage, to be published by Simon & Schuster in August 2024, introduces the Astro Twins' revolutionary IAM system, which simplifies the birth chart into 3 archetypes: innovator, authority, and maven. Her work on the subject of spiritual technology as an essential tool for business success has been featured in Fast Company and at leadership conferences around the world, including the Milken Global Conference and the WIN, Women in Negotiation Summit. Okay, here's the talk with Ophira Edut. Hi, Ophira. Thanks for joining me.
Hey.
Appreciate it. Maybe we can start with I'll do a quick rundown of how we came to talk to each other, and you can chime in with whatever your thoughts
Yeah.
are. But yeah, basically, you're somebody doing publicity for your work. Reached out to me and asked if I would like to have somebody to talk about astrology on my show, and I told her I wasn't really interested because I probably wasn't interested because I don't believe in astrology. But if you were up for having a kind of an unusual discussion, talk about with somebody who doesn't believe in astrology, in the guise of having better conversations with people we disagree with, I'd be up for it. And I didn't expect her to say yes, but or you to say yes, but
Yeah.
you did. So then that's how this happened. I don't know if you want to chime in with anything there, but
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, yeah, astrology isn't even anything to believe in my world. It's a tool. So, I'm kind of on the same page as you. Like, just because you agree with don't agree with somebody doesn't mean you shouldn't have a conversation with them. Otherwise, the world would be CNN or Fox News all day long.
mm,
So,
mhm.
um, I find those kind of conversations more intriguing. We'll see how it ends, but
Have you had many conversations with people that have taken the approach I have, or is that kind of
I
unusual?
mean, not to already jump into differences, but most men are not really steeped in the world of astrology. It's probably not what you talk about with each other, and I know this. And so, yeah, I didn't mean to be an astrologer anyway. It's an
Mm,
accidental career path. So I went to the University of Michigan. I studied art and design. I almost went into engineering. So I more
mhm,
come from this planet than the other ones
mm.
anyway.
Is there a big gender difference in beliefs in astrology? Is it, do you know the stats offhand, or is it
I don't
just
know the
pretty substantial?
stats, but I
Yeah.
think, I would say, if I look at my analytics, it used to be like 97% women. It's like 70% now. So more
Mm,
men have, I think they're younger, probably generations, millennial,
hmm
Gen Z. They've had the apps.
hmm
And frankly, they probably know that if they want to get the girl, sometimes they better go into her world a little bit too. But
know some
exactly.
passing jargon. Um,
Yeah.
well, my mom was always a horoscope reader. I don't think she really believed in it. She just liked reading the horoscopes and thinking about it. And I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself now, but I'm
Yeah.
curious. Do you think a good chunk, it kind of relates to the political surveys a bit too, because sometimes it's hard to differentiate like who really believes in it versus who just kind of enjoys thinking about it. Do you have any
Right.
thoughts on that?
I think that the more people start to kind of do some interior exploration of themselves and self discovery, the more likely they are to stumble upon either astrology or what I'm referring to as spiritual technology. Like, well, why is this happening? Or they'll have a lot of coincidences that start happening, like seeing the same numbers over and over again, or something that like kind of defies the law of averages, and they start to get curious about why that's happening and wondering what else is going on. So, frankly, we know very little of the knowledge that there is to know in the universe. And while I can't tell you why this stuff has worked for me, I can say I've just observed. I've tried to take a scientific approach of curiosity. I don't even know if I believe in astrology. I just see it lining up and corroborating with things. So I'm like, okay, I'll just keep tracking this. But hey, it could all be proven completely something else tomorrow.
So maybe that's a good segue. I was curious. You talked a little bit about coming from a more scientific or skeptical background. What was there a certain moment or series of moments that it got you into astrology?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, it was a moment. So, horoscopes, like you read in the paper, yeah, they're based on basically what's called your sun sign, but not your entire birth chart, which is a freeze frame of where all the planets were in the sky in relation to where you were at your moment of birth. So they're a little roadmap. So I had read, okay, I'm a Sagittarius. Today you will meet a intriguing stranger, very generic stuff that could apply to anyone in the paper, but fun to see. Kind of like reading a fortune cookie. But when I was 21, my boyfriend in college got my full birth chart done. It was a 30-page report detailing where each planet was in this imaginary circle of the sky that we draw called the zodiac, how the planets were angled to each other, which matters. So it's very mathematical in its own way, and what that meant. And it was just a little too bizarrely accurate for me to dismiss. And so I because I was a tech nerd, I got a piece of software and started to plug in you plug in your time, date, and place of birth. And I started to do it for friends and test it out. And it would be kind of uncanny. So I've just kept going with it. I really couldn't tell you why, but
Mhm.
and that's
Mhm.
the problem with skeptics and scientific people, the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, like when they say, how can this planet billions of miles away impact us here? I'm like, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Right, but you've had I mean, it's probably for a lot of things like this in the realm of these things. It's like you've had experiences, sort of probably the same with like religious experiences too. It's like you've had experiences that were hard to explain, and that's a big
Yeah.
part of your
Yeah.
your belief or trust in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I trusted enough to be like, all right, there's something to this, you can look back in history and see all these cycles. That's what really also made it like feel like something worth considering as much as the next scientific study that might get proved wrong in 5 years too. Like I was like, okay, if you look back at trends in history and what was happening in the slower moving outer planets like Pluto or Neptune, and you see what they're supposed to represent and how that lines up with what happened in the past, then you go, oh, wow, this is very strange that this would be repeating. Yeah.
Do you have do you have sort of an elevator pitch? I don't know how often you try to, maybe you don't try to persuade people, but is there sort of like a certain 30-second to a minute kind of thing that you would say to skeptics to try to get them into the funnel?
Into the funnel. You're welcome to come into the funnel or not. But what I like to say to people who say they're skeptics is to remind them what the definition of a skeptic is versus the definition of a cynic. Because a
Hmm.
cynic dismisses something without even trying it. A skeptic actually goes through the process of trying it, suspends judgment, and then decides where they stand on the matter. So most people who say they're skeptics are actually cynics.
Um, so do you have what's your? It doesn't even have to be like a quick pitch, but or do you have like a even a book that you'd recommend for like somebody who was a skeptic, or an elevator pitch of some sort of like what's your the best arguments, and maybe it comes down to you either experience the see the things that you see when you try to do when you take astrology, try it out, or you don't see it. I don't
Mhm.
know what the best
Yeah, I mean, that's a
the
great question. So, you know, one of the weird things that happened at the beginning of my astrology journey was I was working in IT at the University of Michigan. It was my part-time job. Um, and even though I was an IT specialist, most of the time all I had to do was pull jammed paper out of the printer and console PhD students who'd only saved their dissertation to one floppy disk and watch it getting eaten by a computer. But one day there was a man who came into the computer lab and had a paper jam, and he was printing out pages and pages of birthdays of celebrities. This was like in 1996 or something. And I helped unjam and I was like, oh, what is this? And he gave me a bound book. I think it was called the Celebrity Birthday Directory. And it listed from January 1st to December 31st pages of notable people and their birthdays one in chronological order. So I could see everyone who was born under each zodiac sign and all the common traits that they had. So that was one of the ways that I probably observed, and then I started to observe. So okay, what I would say to skeptics um, is you should get your birth chart done or even do a free report and see what with the 13 points of it, how that whole picture might reflect you. And it doesn't mean you have to believe in it, but maybe there's something that can be illuminating. Human beings are our own biggest blind spots. I mean, I you described in your book how you had a moment of revelation where you saw that what you were doing wasn't productive, when you were getting angry about, about Trumpism and that kind of thing. And then you decided to do things differently. Well, sometimes you could read an astrological profile and have that moment of awareness about yourself. Oh, yeah, I do that. It's okay. It's human, but it's not really working. It's not getting me what I want. So maybe there's another alternative. And that's what I got from it was like being able to pull out and get a bird's eye view of myself that in spite of being an identical twin, I was never able to have as a human. So it was a little bit like an aid there, like a hearing aid for listening to how other people might experience you.
And sorry, like I said, the I don't know if you can hear it, but there's
No, I don't
somebody
hear it.
doing
I
some.
don't hear it.
I don't. Okay, that's good. It's just somebody doing some loud work right by the window now.
Oh,
It always
yes.
so always happens. Um,
Always.
yeah, and the book for anybody listening, the book she was referring to was the How Contempt Destroys Democracy. My book on political polarization. Yeah,
Oh.
one question someone sent me when I said I was doing this talk, they were curious about if you see, like, does belief in astrology entail or require belief in a higher power or God or something? Do you see? Because I could see it how it might go both ways, as like some kind of natural explanation versus, but it also seems kind of like the details of astrology seems like it might require a higher power of some sort. So I'm curious how you see that broken down.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think it's become sort of a modern spirituality even for people who don't follow religion or believe in a god or that kind of thing. I mean, I think you might hear people who follow astrology talk about the universe, but I mean, it's a willingness to believe that there's something greater than ourselves at work, making patterns. I mean, it's no more strange than think, okay, there are UAPs, right? We don't know what those are, but apparently there's lots of evidence of those. So it's like the willingness to admit that we don't know everything and that there might be something greater than us, but it does not require religious beliefs. In fact, some religious dogmas think astrology is evil. Although I have to say, I have a lot of devoutly religious and completely anti-religious people in my audience. So it's actually astrology can be a gathering place for people with very different backgrounds too. So it works as a nice tool for that.
I was curious, do you believe in other things in the spiritual realm, like, say, Reiki, energy work, other things, or are there certain things that where you're like, I don't believe that thing, where somebody might be surprised where you draw the line, basically.
I think it depends on who's giving it out because there are, spiritual technology has a lot of very bad representatives. We need some new brand ambassadors, that's for sure. Because there are a lot of people who do not, they either speak in jargon to the other person or like, I sense an aura around you, or they say something that makes my eyes roll too. But I have had Reiki and was like, okay, maybe there's something going on here. What I like about astrology though is you can actually measure it. It is actually based on where something is. Okay. Jupiter is literally in that point in the sky. I can look up and see it. So whereas if someone's giving me energy, I just maybe kind of have to believe them or not, or be like, well, that was relaxing anyway. So
So it sounds like you're not big into that the touchless energy working into this. Then.
I'm a skeptic at all times, even of astrology, meaning that there's I will at least always reserve some percentage of myself that can be like, okay, maybe it is all bullshit. Fine. I'm not attached. My ego's not attached to
Mm,
it.
mm.
It's like it's what I do, but I can also maybe I'm just tuning into someone. I don't know.
So someone was also curious, because people have said, that despite the the studies showing that astrology doesn't have much to back it up in study wise, somebody asked, would you see it considering the viability of it? It's
It's a big
unfalsible.
word.
God, I can't even say that.
That's
Unfalsifiable is the word, I guess.
a
Yeah.
good word.
So considering it's got that aspect, would you view it as sort of a religious thing, or related to not specific religions, but do you view it in the realm of uh, kind of trusting, or do you? It sounds like maybe you'd say it's more like you view it as working for you and working for other people. So as long as you still view it that way, you
It's you're bringing up something really interesting that is kind of a modern dilemma. Like when we're overly self-reliant, that can cause problems. But religious institutions and beliefs, it's like we need community. We need to come together around shared values and principles. But that also is the basis of polarization. We know that there are so many problems when people gather around a shared set of beliefs because it's usually there's I believe this and anything outside of that cannot exist. And that mindset is what I think is where the problem is. Not that someone is personally opting to believe in astrology as their path or tool or what they use. It's like someone likes to work out with weights, someone else likes to go to yoga, is the end result is hopefully they're probably in better shape from whichever pathway they did. So I look at astrology that way. That said, religious texts have a lot of astrology in them. Even the three stars that the Magi, the wise men, followed, that was Orion's belt. That was astronomy,
Mhm. Oh yeah,
And yeah,
to your point, I mean, I was talking to somebody recently. Her her daughter is into astrology and does readings and things like this, and she was describing, even if even if one could doubt, you know, have your skepticism about astrology, she thought that it was useful for it was a good way into examining people's traits and
yeah,
personalities, like even apart. So even if say astrology has no basis in reality, but even apart from that, she was getting practical skills and thinking in the sense of like trying to think more about people's personalities and traits and explaining uh, maybe why someone does certain actions. It was helping
yeah.
her analyze people's behavior more, regardless of what the the origin might be. Because I don't know if you do you have anything
I
to
have
say
thoughts on
about
that.
that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's true. It's like you could go to therapy for years and maybe it doesn't do anything, but if maybe your life externally doesn't change from going to therapy, but internally you feel better, and maybe you take an action that you wouldn't have otherwise. So what I think you're saying is like, does it really matter if it can be peer reviewed and scientifically proven if it helps someone who's struggling feel better, or it helps someone gain more self-awareness and be a kinder human in this rage-filled world? So anything that increases tolerance today is good for me. And actually, at the time that I stumbled on astrology, I was publishing a multicultural magazine at the University of Michigan called Hughes for women. This was early 90s.
Like HUES?
HUES,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and,
Right.
it was a student project that my sister and I turned into a national magazine, and we had a collective of women and we would write. I mean, it was probably DEI before those were even more than someone's initials, And it was just how I grew up in Detroit, in a very inclusive, multicultural neighborhood. So just thought, oh, it'd be nice to have a magazine that reflected the world that I lived in, didn't exclude anyone, but also just showed more different varieties of human. And what we would so we would meet and we would come up with articles, and they were, we were in our 20s, so they would be political or about identity. And then the talk would drift to astrology. And I noticed it took like a 180-degree turn. Like everybody's, like there was no tension, there was no, you know, weirdness. Nobody was offended if you didn't like Geminis. It was like, and oh my God, yes, he is such a Virgo, blah, blah. So it
Mhm.
brought everybody together. I was like, this is incredible. This is like the only thing I've ever found where people can talk about differences and it's not polarizing them. So
Mm,
I
mhm.
also saw the utility in it.
Hmm. Mhm. I was curious. I've read that the statistics of the increase in people being into astrology over the last few years. Do you have thoughts on? It seems to me, and other people have written about it too, where the stresses related to political polarization and fears and concerns and anxieties have played a role there. I feel like I've seen that in people I know.
Hmm.
It can be astrology and other things can be something that brings you comfort. Do you have thoughts on that
Yeah,
angle
I mean,
or that?
I agree that that's part of it, but I'm also like, I'm kind of a fun centered person too. Like, you don't just it's like this the talk about it has gotten so heavy, like, oh, you have to have trauma, so you need a it's like,
I haven't heard
yes.
that.
That is true that, yeah, like there is anxiety and uncertainty, and astrology is
Mm,
helpful. But I also think that you also have to know yourself more in this world. I mean, there are and we're meeting people virtually. We're expected to form trust and connection with people that we only see on a Zoom screen or that we meet in our DMs in a social media platform. Like, we're not tied to a location. We don't have to marry someone that lives within a driving distance or send letters or carrier pit. Like, you
mhm.
can meet your soulmate and you could be in Denver, they could be in Dubai, and it's not unrealistic that you could have this connection. But in order to, like, you know locate each other in time and space without the physical and geographical signifiers, the more you can know about the person quickly, the more you can be like, okay, is this a catfish situation or is this like someone that might be worth, you know getting a green card for? I don't know.
Mm.
So I think that we just have to we're a global society now, so we need more ways of sussing each other out.
Oh, so you're saying the interest in astrology is part of that, like
Yeah.
getting to know people from a
It's
distance.
yeah, like,
Oh, I
okay, let's
never
see.
never
He's a
thought about that angle.
Scorpio. He's saying he's like this, but let's just make sure that those traits are
Hmm.
kosher. Or, oh, you're a Scorpio and I'm a Sagittarius and da 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 da. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
It can also be an international icebreaker.
yeah, never thought about that. But I do. I mean, I do agree that I think a lot of people would agree that the world's gotten more. We've gotten more isolated from each other and more online and these
Mhm.
things. And I could see how maybe the astrology part could appeal to people for the sense of getting to know people a little bit more and interest in other people. Yeah, I never thought about that angle.
Yeah, we're physically isolated, but we're virtually connected. Like, so
Right.
it's also kind of it's very disoriented. You have to locate yourself
Oh yeah,
somewhere,
I find the modern landscape seems disorienting often. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
I
let's
mean, I
see.
I approach astrology and the people who follow it with the same level of curiosity too. And I do often get asked, "Okay, Mercury's going retrograde. Should I hide in my closet for 3 weeks?" That's a phenomenon now that you'll read about even in the Wall Street Journal. Um or like, what should I do? Should I be scared? And I really try to discourage people from looking at it that way. It's not,
Hmm.
the superstitious mindset does not serve anybody. So that's my rant on that one.
Um, do you feel I don't know much about astrology clearly, but is there a sense that, or do you believe, or do some people believe that, the future is entirely written, or is it more like we have traits and we're not sure what will happen? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think both. I think some people follow it quite to the letter, but I don't believe in that. I think that the more you know, the more free will you actually can have. So how
Hmm.
I've come to see it is like your there's two types of astrology. There's your birth chart, which is your kind of psychological personology portrait and profile. I call it your factory settings. So it's like you might have a Windows operating system, you might have a Mac operating system. You can't really change that. You could try to simulate the environment on the other one's desktop, but it probably won't run as well as you want. So you might be better off learning how to operate on the platform you're on. But that's all. You get your chart. This is your okay, you're a Mac. So what apps do you want to put on there? What software are you going to use that Mac for? That's all up to you. So you can choose to customize your device any way you want. And then there's the timing of astrology too. So we there's that's called transits, and that's the movement of the planets in the sky. Your personal birth chart never changes. It's a freeze frame of the exact second that you're born. And no one else, even my twin sister, has a slightly different chart. We're born 4 minutes apart. But there's the predictive astrology, which is based on how the planets are moving now and their relationship to each other. They're always moving, as we know. So that's sort of like the weather. I mean, it's this rate. I don't know why, with our advanced technology, it seems like the weather has gotten less accurate than ever. I don't know why. Um, but uh, astrology forecasts are a bit like the weather too. Like there's a good chance it might rain, but it's really you have free will because you can choose if you want to bring an umbrella or just take a chance and get wet.
Hmm.
So,
I was curious, and maybe this relates to what you were saying about the more simplistic newspaper ones versus other ones, but you know,
mhm.
say say I'm a mother that's going to be giving birth, and like say I was going to deliver, if I hadn't interfered, say I was going to deliver in this time frame, but I get like an emergency C-section and deliver early, like how does what's your explanation of like which astrology sign or astrology reading applies?
Yeah,
And I don't know. Is it
believe
just
it or
when they're
not, I
born,
actually
or
get asked that quite a
is that a
bit.
common? Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was a common question.
Well, some people think, okay, oh my God, I don't want my kid to be a Taurus or whatever. Like,
Oh,
too
so
bad. You're
so
getting what you're getting.
they actually might get a C-section to avoid the Taurus.
I've heard stories that some people have, but I personally like my own personal spiritual belief is that um I have seen enough charts where I personally believe in reincarnation, but that's me. And I my theory for myself is that soul picks that exact time to be born for the perfect challenges and opportunities that it needs to learn in this lifetime. But that's me. And I know like that might sound really out there to some people, but I think you get what you get. Like my little sister is a Libra with a Cancer rising, and she's she's one of those people that drives me a little bit crazy. But of course, those people are often your greatest teacher. So when I was getting ready to give birth, my daughter was either going to be a Virgo or a Libra. She was late. She crossed over into Libra. I was like, oh God, anything but the Libra with the Cancer rising. That's a 2-hour window to be born. And of course, what did I get? Exactly that. And I was like, okay, so I guess I'm supposed to learn something about this personality type that's very feminine and I'm not really. And so I
So
was like, yeah.
so you're saying there's kind of like trying to avoid things is like, well, it will be how it will be, kind of.
Yeah, it
Is that
might
what?
find you anyway. You can try to avoid a lesson or growth, but it'll find you one way or another.
So you're
So,
saying don't get the early C-section just to change the science? Is that?
yeah, I mean, if you do, that means that's when I feel like that's when your kid was supposed to be born. Then
Mm,
if you get the
if it
appointment,
happens,
that's
yeah. If it happens,
yeah,
that's how the universe said it would happen. If yeah,
right. There
right.
is no perfect
Get
that's yeah.
getting
Yeah,
into that free will, meant
right.
to be versus it's hard to
And my
say.
my grounded rational feedback to that would be like, okay, you're going to be a parent. That's a huge life change. So of course you're going to want to mitigate against any uncertainty and hope that you can control how your kid turns out, but you can't. Like
Right.
beyond a certain point. So it's like those moments when we have to surrender control to whether it's whatever it is, just even if you
Mhm.
don't believe in anything greater than yourself, you still have
Right.
to surrender like, okay, it's not all going to go my way, no matter how smart, educated, peer reviewed, science
Mhm.
backed I am.
Right.
This is not going the way I want it to.
Gotta, yeah, the parenting will teach you some humility. Uh,
Yes.
let's see. I was curious, kind of getting in the realm of related to the political polarization. I was curious if you often encounter or perceive or see people insulting you or other people for belief in astrology. Is that a common thing, or
I mean, I think they probably try to. I don't take it
you don't
personally,
see it
though.
in your day to day life though? It's not like people go out of their way to.
I mean, they do on
They
social
do.
media, they
Oh, they do.
insult each other all day long. I just think
Mm,
it's funny because 'cause I'm not my ego isn't invested in it. I'm like, "Go ahead and
mm.
insult it, fine," you know? Like, whatever.
Yeah, it sort of sounds like it rolls off
It does, but
your
not
back a
for
little bit.
everybody. Some people get
Yeah.
really, really
Hmm.
protective of it.
Hmm.
Typically, I mean, I do think that there is a good amount of sexism to some of that, though. There's a whole, like, oh, like, I've read a couple of really smart posts about, like, well, male culture, for example, is really into fantasy football. So that's maybe I've seen that like kind of made the parallel of how women are about astrology
Oh, interesting.
sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, like okay, it's perfectly fine for you to paint your face for March Madness and bet on speculative things, but you know, when women do something it's often maligned. And I do think that there is some truth to that.
Well, yeah, that I'm not into sports at all. You've actually reminded me that it might be a good follow up to ask a sport inquire a hardcore sports fanatic and ask them some similar questions because I'm curious about that myself. I find that really
Mm.
hard to understand.
Yeah,
And
that's statistics and betting. Actually, I worked on a project with Ricky Williams, who's a Heisman Trophy winning NFL football player who is now a serious astrologer and has an app called Leela. So, I mean, there are more and more people kind of crossing those unexpected genres, which I always find really fascinating too.
do you want to get into? You had done a reading for me. We could either talk about
Yeah.
because I'm curious in some sort of granular way. We could either talk about how you see your sign impacting your personality traits, or
Hmm.
we could talk about anything you thought was interesting about mine.
Yeah.
Whichever you'd like to do
Why
there.
don't we talk about the premise of the book and why I wrote it as kind of a bridge
Okay.
for people like you
Okay.
who might not, ever dip a toe in astrology.
Mhm.
So,
Sure.
yeah. So, The Astrology Advantage, our new book, it's actually our 21st book.
You and
And
your identical
me and my
twin
identical
sister. Yeah.
twin, we write as
Mhm.
the Astro Twins, a funny moniker that someone gave us long ago and it stuck. So, um, for many, many years, for the last probably 20, 25 years, we've been writing, predictive astrology. We have a book called Mom Astrology about parenting and fun twists on it. And we do a yearly book with predictions for every year, for every sign. But
It's like a
over,
farmer's almanac.
yeah, it is exactly. Ben Franklin was an almanac guy who had the stars mapped out in every one of his almanacs.
Oh, he
So
was. But was that astrology related or?
well, at the time, astrology and astronomy were not seen as so far apart, and sometimes they were seen as one and the same. So, what astrologers use to track the movements and positions of the planets is called an ephemeris. It's just a day by day map of where everything is. And Ben Franklin and also Benjamin Banneker, he made almanacs. They have ephemerides is the plural in every one of those almanacs. So,
Mm,
yeah,
star
that
tracking,
was
yeah.
the founding fathers used astrology.
But to
There's
be clear, he wasn't like he didn't believe it was impacting him, or did he think that it was impacting humans?
well, enough to map out when, I think it was probably more in the hunting, planting, fishing, full moon, but he used all the planets that were known, which was,
Hmm.
you know, through Saturn. So that Uranus was discovered in 1781, but and then Neptune in the 1850, I think. So,
Hmm.
yeah, but yeah, he has them all mapped out. You'd have to, when you start to look back, because like I told you, when you look back through history, like for example, the United States was founded when Pluto, which is the great transformational force, was in Capricorn, the sign of governments. And 200, and then it was there for, I don't know, uh, 15 years or so. And then left for 250 years and came back to Capricorn in 2008, and it's leaving November 19th, 2024. So we had this 16-year cycle where Pluto, which destroys and reforms and makes us rebuild again, was going through the sign that rules governments and nations and the economy. And if you look at all the things that have come to be in these last 16 years, we had our first black president, we had our first orange president, we have Kamala Harris, like, as a serious contender. We have Bitcoin and digital currency. We're about to go into Pluto and Aquarius, which was when last time in the 1780s and 90s when the US Mint was formed and the dollar became the national currency. Now we have cryptocurrency and probably, we have Bitcoin EFTs, and it's like, wait, did I say? Yeah. So it's
Um,
like ETFs. I don't know. Yes.
yeah, NFTs. Yeah. Quick question: when they say like a planet's in something, does that just mean
Yes.
like it's in front of the?
I'm glad
What
you
does the in
asked.
mean?
So, yes, I'm so glad you asked because that's, again, that will lead to why we wrote the book that we did. So, if you to understand how we look at the zodiac, imagine yourself lying on the grass, spread out a blanket, looking up at the stars. You draw a circle around the sky, an imaginary circle, and divide it into 12 slices, equal slices. And each of those represents a different astrological sign, one of the 12. So from from your view, our view on that blanket looking up, we would see Pluto moving through the part of the sky that's marked by Capricorn. That's how that would work. So it's a tracking of how the planets are in relation to us here from our
Mm,
view. So
hmm.
again, I have no freaking idea why it works or why it's accurate. It's just uncanny when you look at what it and you think, oh, maybe that would mean this. When was it there last? When was it there the time before? And you go, oh gosh, that was a significant moment in history. Why? I do not know. So
Yeah. Did you want to talk about
the book
the book, or up to you?
and
But yeah,
you and you.
or even you, like the traits that you've seen based on your reading, and that might be even more interesting than me actually, because you
No
know
way.
yourself. Yeah, but
No,
either.
yours is way more interesting.
Oh
We'll get
well,
into
if
that.
you
I'm
want to,
bored
yeah,
with myself. Yeah,
sure.
so no, I made you a whole report. So
Oh, okay.
so
Might as well
the
talk
the
about
let's talk about it. So the book that we wrote, The Astrology Advantage, was born out of over the last 20 years we started to have people come to consult us for their birth charts, and a lot of them were CEOs and executives and world leaders and like very impressed academics and very, impressive, credentialed people. And um, a lot of people who were wanting to find their purpose or start a business with that. So we began offering courses showing people how to use and understand their birth charts to plan out how to build a brand or create their career path. So out of that, I was like, this there's got to be a simpler way to get this to people because the chart is very complex. And while you can learn it, it's a lot to remember. And a lot of people, it goes in one ear and out the other. So we created a system using what's called the chart dominance. We took 13 parts of the chart and just distilled them into three archetypes that are called innovator, authority, and maven. And, your score weighs out how many planets or placements or points are in each of those. And that's what gives you your I am innovator, authority, maven. That's what gives you your type. So if someone wants to do it, then go to astrostyle.com/I am and take the quiz. You just need your time, date, and place of birth. So you're actually a hybrid of two. You're the innovator maven, which is interesting because you know who else is an innovator maven? Donald Trump,
Oh, yes. I
your
knew we
arch
had a lot in
enemy.
common.
You have nothing in common, and yet, isn't that fascinating that you would be looking at him as someone to try to understand? So,
Yeah,
um,
like many people.
yes, it's true. It's true. Can't really prove that one is a unique thing for you. I can certainly do that,
I'm
but
drawn to him somehow. Even I don't know what it is about him.
there's
Just kidding.
something
Just kidding.
about him. Yeah. Well, the archetype of the innovator maven, you also have fire, earth, air, and water, which are the elements. So you're predominantly air as well. So you're the air innovator maven. There's 84 combinations, which is the wizard, a forward thinking, multifaceted prodigy, hey, who can see the big picture and generate new ideas in a variety of mediums. That
Okay, that
tracks.
sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah.
just kidding. Just kidding. So are these your things you've come up with, a
Yeah.
wizard and stuff? Oh, okay, okay. I was
Yes.
making sure that wasn't
Yes.
okay. Gotcha.
Nope.
Well, yeah. I mean,
We've
I'm
named
happy.
them.
I'm happy with that description. So I mean, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, exactly. I
Uh,
mean, it's something like, again, I feel like for it not to seem trite or silly or implausible, you have to like actually look. But there's a branch of astrology called mundane astrology, which is events happening here in the world, looking back over time and history. And that is where I think a lot of skeptics go, that is fascinating. Again, you never don't believe in anything if you don't want to. Who cares if you do? That's your personal choice, but
hmm hmm
but it can be a useful guide to see looking back, looking ahead. People say to me and my sister, "You guys predicted this, this, and that." I'm just looking at what happened the last time that planet was there and going, "Hmm, speculating," but it keeps turning out to be right.
Mm. Do you have some specific things come to mind about things that you thought you predicted or other people thought you
Yeah,
predicted?
I mean, in our we had a 2024 horoscope book. We saw an assassination attempt on a national leader. We saw a rise in cryptocurrency again, even though there were bad speculations about it. We saw, God, a lot of things. We have a reel of all the predictions so far, even like some celebrity breakups and pregnancies. Like, we do the range.
Mm.
So
hmm
yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't touched on? That anything in the realm of like how what we've talked about at a meta level relates to divides in politics or anything like that?
Hmm. Well, I guess I would ask you, now that you've talked to me, what are your thoughts about astrology?
Well, I mean, my thoughts haven't changed. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't expect them
Yeah, I
to.
didn't expect you to expect it. So,
Right, right, right.
uh, but no, yeah, I thought it was an interesting conversation. On a scale of 1 to 10, how awkward were my questions for you?
They were great. They
Oh,
were
okay,
fine.
all right.
I don't care if they're awkward. I'd rather someone actually ask me the questions than troll a more thin-skinned astrologer on Twitter.
hmm Well, yeah, I'm interested in why people believe things. Like I think I might have told you this. It's like I'm surrounded by people who think very different things than me, right? Who believe things that I think are not right and don't have good foundations. And that's kind of like what high political divides create the environment where many people, you know, who otherwise are your political allies or on the other side have pretty, some pretty out there beliefs sometimes, to me, from
They
my
really
perspective.
do.
uh, so just to say, I find it interesting. I found this conversation interesting in that realm where it's like, I think, it's kind of like it's the human, it's a human thing to, we have to accept that we live amongst people who believe very different things than us, and we might think those beliefs are dumb or ignorant or whatever, but it's like that's what being human means, is, making peace with that and seeing that you're a person, I'm a person, recognizing each other's humanity as much as we can, and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
That's what I liked about your book. It was like, it doesn't really matter what people believe. If you're like, I mean, it's really interesting why do people need, what is the utility of a belief? I mean, this is me being my zodiac sign. I'm a Sagittarius, and we're philosophical. We're supposed to be the big picture questioners of everything. So I think I am true to my sign in that way. But it's like, why do we need beliefs? Are they useful? What is useful about a belief, and what's dangerous about a belief? Like,
Right.
maintaining that, I feel like if we can maintain a position of like stepping out of ourselves as best as we can and observing, why do I need to believe? Why would I need you to believe in astrology to feel like I could believe in it? Like, why would it bother me if you didn't? Like, you obviously believe in something positive, which is people coexisting. So to me, that's more important than anything.
Yeah, and like, and I could turn around and I could try to make the case. I could work hard against astrology while recognizing that you're a person and not disrespecting you. I could minimize the disrespect for you, even if I was like every day writing articles about how bad astrology is. I could focus on the ideas and not, I think that's where
Sure.
the connection to the political stuff comes in, because it's like, we can work for, persuade people, work for whatever you want, but I think the what I try to focus on is the, avoiding dehumanizing things and recognizing the people that, even if I might disagree with you on astrology, there's no need to insult you, no need to say you're stupid, or whatever these things
But you
are.
could also
Same,
draw.
you
Yeah.
you could do, and just like you hopefully wouldn't do the, like, you idiot, you don't believe in astrology. I don't know.
Oh
I don't know.
no.
There's people that do that in the
I
astrology
mean,
community.
I have, I have a family that votes in all different ways for their reasons too. So I think we all do. So we have to, but look, if you dropped facts on me, I've seen every Neil deGrasse Tyson video. I know it's like, I'm not going to argue with the scientific tools that were used to measure those facts are not wrong.
Mhm.
Adam Grant, who's a great thinker and writer, thinks astrology is dangerous for people. He's a Leo like you, but Leos never believe in astrology. No, I'm just kidding. But
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
but I'm like, but he has a real vendetta against, I think,
Right.
astrologers, and it's like, dude, what did we ever do to you? I mean, and
Yeah.
then it makes me wonder, like, well, was he I had a guy once who came over, and he walked into my house and he was like, astrology's bullshit. And I was like, okay, cool. But it turned out that like he had had a business partner that did him wrong and justified it by, well, I'm a Scorpio. What do you expect? So I'm like,
Mm,
it's not the astrology, it's the person who is using it,
mm,
and
mhm,
misusing it. But I can understand why neurons that fire together wire together. So you linked astrology with a negative experience that you had, and now you have a bias. And
mhm,
that's
mhm.
how the human brain. I'm very, very interested in how the human mind and brain and works too, because we have to be aware of that too.
Well, I don't know if you want to answer this, but I'm curious, because I can understand. I myself, I would say I do. I'm not talking about you here. I'm talking about astrology in general. I do understand how why people would see it as bad, because if you believe it's not based on anything real, then it, on itself, in itself, it doesn't. it's not bad, but you can see how it might lead to believing in other things that one believes is false and having a lower standard threshold for believing in things. And I'm sure
Hmm.
you could see that angle even if you
Yeah,
disagree
I
with
want to
it.
hear more. Like, so are you say I want to understand. So are you saying like it's a lower bar, like someone might typecast people into 12 different buckets, or do
Well,
tell?
well, I'm sure it's probably stuff that Adam Grant has talked about. I
Yeah, but
assume
I'm
I'm sure
curious. I
it's
want to
stuff you.
know.
Well, I would say
Yeah.
there's the typecasting, which that's what I mean. Like the astrology stuff itself is probably like not that dangerous unless it's like used in extreme ways or something where somebody's like using it to like judge people immediately and like act negatively to them. But what I mean is like people who see it as a gateway to other low proof things, right? Like they might be like, well, because I got into astrology, I might am more likely to embrace like simplistic, low evidence conspiracy theories, which could be more harmful. Or that I think that's what people are talking about. I haven't read Adam Grant's critiques, but I imagine that's what occurs to me, and that's where I get into like I could be me or anybody else could be against or for these ideas while recognizing like I don't think that you believe what you believe in the same way like I can make critiques of religion, but I don't think that makes the religious practitioners bad people, right? But I think that's kind of the distinction I'm
Well,
focused on
that's
here.
interesting. So, I mean, I'm sure there are people that take certain things at face value, whether it's astrology or religion, and they probably tend to be prone to conspiracy theories because they're looking for a simple answer. They might be at
Hmm.
that law and order level of the hierarchy, and maybe that's just the mentality. I would invite
Looking for quick,
yeah,
simple answers, kind of thing, right?
right, and
Yeah, yeah.
astrology could for sure and is by some people used that way. I would also invite you to consider that there are people who use astrology in a much more sophisticated way, seeking to understand more and ask better questions. So I think it's the intention behind it. And that said, I do the ubiquity of pop astrology would make it easy for someone to grab onto that and be like, well, they're a Gemini and da da da, and they're also like, you know, they probably voted for Hillary or whatever, just like
Oh, right, yeah, like
or whatever,
stereotypical,
or yes,
reaching for stereotypical kind of, yeah,
or the
biases or something.
QAnon kind. I mean, you're right though. That is something that I find alarming too, because when I started astrology as a hobby and then it became a job because I was a writer and in publishing and I was given a column and then it also went from there. But I really do think that the wellness world, which has merged with the kind of the spiritual stuff like this, like coming together, there is a lot of like scary conspiracy stuff going on. And you will
Right.
find people in the astrology world who are like touting bullshit. And, you're not wrong about that at all.
Yeah, there was some book, you might have heard of it. It was about like the health and wellness overlap with the kind of getting into the vaccine kind of COVID
Well,
vaccines
exactly. Whew.
conspiracy theories, and there was this map over in like the YouTube influencer kind of realm, and it
Oh,
was I
wow.
can't remember it had a catchy title of combining two words, but
I got to check this. Let me know if you remember because I'm
yeah, I'll send it to
curious.
you later. But yeah, but that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like it makes sense that you could see that concern. It makes sense you could see it even as you don't think it's seeing the whole
Yeah.
picture or not telling us something about astrology
I mean, if I
specifically.
had a better way of, like, connecting with people as quickly as astrology allows me to and just, like, opening doors to really great conversations, I would use it, but I am as equally as concerned about that as it sounds like you are. I think that there's a lot of and astrology should not necessarily be treated as it's it's like, no, it's not the same as what you might get a PhD in. It's like, this is apples and oranges, and when I think the world of TikTok, the era that we're in, it's like anyone can be an expert. And astrology is unregulated. Like it's not like and I don't know that it should be, but it's not like you have to like have a certain amount of credentials to do a reading for someone. There are people who are like 21 years old, living in their parents' basement, doing Cash App readings, and there are scholars of 40 years, like, and I don't know who's better or worse, but it's a wild west of sorts. So
Yeah.
I do understand where you're coming from too.
Well, thank you for joining me and having an unusual conversation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being open-minded and bringing an alien on your show.
That was a talk with Ophira Edut, professional astrologer. This has been the People Who Read People podcast with me, Zachary Elwood. You can learn more about this podcast at peoplewhoreadpeople.com. Thanks for listening. Music by Small Skies.